The truth doesn't knock before it enters a courtroom. It waits until the guilty stop looking over their shoulders. By the time Officer Daniel Brooks stood before the federal judge in a perfectly pressed Navy uniform, the confidence that had carried him through 18 years of policing had disappeared. His hands rested quietly in front of him, his jaw locked, his eyes fixed on the massive courtroom monitor that remained dark for just a few unbearable seconds. The silence felt heavier than any sentence the judge could possibly announce. Reporters filled every available seat. Prosecutors whispered to one another. Veteran officers who had once admired Daniel avoided looking in his direction, as though acknowledging him would somehow stain their own careers. Across the room sat Ava Carter, one of the most respected prosecutors in the state, wearing a charcoal suit with the same calm expression she had carried through every hearing, every accusation, every headline that tried to destroy her reputation. She never smiled. She never celebrated. She simply watched. The federal marshal connected a small evidence drive to the courtroom system, and the screen flickered to life. Daniel swallowed hard. His attorney leaned closer and quietly reminded him that nothing had been proven yet. But even those words sounded hollow. Somewhere in the gallery, someone whispered that this was the body camera footage everyone had been waiting months to see. Another reporter adjusted a camera, convinced the next few minutes would become national news before sunset. The judge glanced toward the prosecution table and nodded once. "Proceed." The room became so still that even the faint hum of the air conditioning seemed impossibly loud. Daniel knew exactly what file was about to play. He also knew there had only ever been one copy. Or at least that was what he believed. He remembered every decision he had made that afternoon, every confident step, every assumption that no one had been paying attention. He remembered convincing himself that power came from wearing a badge, that credibility belonged automatically to the person in uniform. What he never considered was that the quiet woman, standing beside her vehicle, had already spent years building a career around exposing carefully hidden lies. Ava lowered her eyes for a brief moment, not because she feared what the screen would reveal, but because she remembered the day her entire world had nearly collapsed. She remembered neighbors staring from their front porches, television helicopters circling overhead, strangers posting her photograph across social media before a single fact had been verified. She remembered colleagues forced into silence while commentators declared her career finished. Through all of it, she never argued in front of the cameras. She never begged anyone to believe her. She trusted something far stronger than public opinion. She trusted evidence. The courtroom monitor flashed once more before freezing on a single timestamp. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. His breathing became noticeably slower. The judge adjusted her glasses without saying a word. Every pair of eyes shifted toward the glowing screen, waiting for the recording to begin. What none of them realized, not the reporters, not the spectators, not even Daniel himself 24 hours earlier, was that this story had not started inside a courtroom. It had started on an ordinary afternoon outside the Hall of Justice, where one traffic stop, one hidden decision, and one unnoticed camera quietly began rewriting the future of everyone involved. A bright spring sun reflected across the marble steps of the Jefferson County Hall of Justice, where attorneys hurried through revolving doors carrying briefcases packed with motions, evidence, and deadlines that would shape lives before the day ended. The courthouse stood like a monument to fairness, its white columns towering above the busy streets of Birmingham, Alabama. Yet everyone who worked inside understood that justice depended as much on the people serving it as the words engraved into the stone. Ava Carter climbed the front staircase with measured confidence, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, a leather portfolio tucked neatly beneath one arm. She greeted the courthouse security officers by name, thanked the elderly volunteer opening the entrance doors, and paused. Only long enough to help a nervous young witness locate the correct courtroom before continuing toward her office. Respect had never been handed to Ava. She had earned it case by case, hearing by hearing, always allowing facts to speak louder than emotion. During 10 years as a prosecutor, she had developed a reputation that reached beyond Birmingham. Defense attorneys respected her preparation. Judges trusted her integrity. Victims appreciated the dignity she showed every family regardless of background. Even many police officers admired her professionalism, although others quietly viewed her as a threat because she refused to excuse misconduct simply because someone wore a badge. That morning carried unusual weight. Within 48 hours, she would begin presenting evidence in a corruption case involving several public officials and one veteran patrol officer, whose testimony had become increasingly inconsistent during the investigation. Rumors had spread through every hallway that convictions could permanently change the careers of influential people. Inside the courthouse, conversations stopped whenever Ava entered a room. Some greeted her warmly. Others simply watched in silence before turning away. She noticed every glance without reacting to any of them. Years had taught her that confidence often made people uncomfortable, especially when it belonged to someone they had already underestimated. Across town, Officer Daniel Brooks adjusted his patrol uniform in the locker room mirror before pinning his badge into place with practiced precision. 18 years on the force had made him one of the department's most recognizable officers. Younger recruits admired his arrest numbers. Local television stations frequently requested interviews whenever the department celebrated successful operations. His photograph decorated the hallway, honoring distinguished service. To the public, Daniel represented experience and authority. To co-workers who knew him well, another reputation quietly followed him through every precinct hallway. He disliked prosecutors who questioned officers. He especially disliked Ava Carter because she had challenged his reports more than once. During previous cases, asking careful questions that exposed contradictions he assumed no one would notice. Daniel convinced himself she was attacking law enforcement instead of protecting the law itself. Every courtroom disagreement deepened that resentment until professional disagreement slowly became something far more personal. Late that afternoon, fate quietly began pulling both of them toward the same parking lot behind the courthouse. Neither realized that before the sun disappeared below the city skyline, a single encounter would trigger events capable of changing not only their own futures, but also the future of everyone who believed the truth could simply be buried beneath authority. The courthouse parking structure echoed with the familiar rhythm of closing doors, distant conversations, and engines coming to life as employees prepare to head home after another demanding day. Long shadows stretched across the concrete floor while the last rays of sunlight filtered through the open sides of the garage. Ava Carter unlocked her gray sedan and placed her leather portfolio carefully on the passenger seat before taking one final look at the courthouse towering above the city. Tomorrow's preparation still filled her thoughts. She mentally reviewed witness statements, evidence charts, and courtroom strategy, determined to ensure every fact was presented with absolute precision. She never noticed the white patrol vehicle slowly turning into the opposite lane of the parking structure. Officer Daniel Brooks remained behind the wheel for several seconds, watching from a distance. His expression stayed calm, almost casual, but his attention never drifted from Ava's vehicle. Earlier that afternoon, he had overheard conversations confirming she would personally prosecute the corruption case that threatened several careers. In his mind, she had crossed one line too many. Rather than accepting accountability, he convinced himself she had become the enemy of honest officers, twisting every previous disagreement into proof that she deserved to be stopped. He stepped out of the patrol car and adjusted his duty belt before walking across the garage with deliberate confidence. His greeting sounded almost friendly as he approached. "Good evening, counselor. Mind if I ask you a few questions?" Ava looked up, recognizing him immediately. "Good evening, Officer Brooks. Is something wrong?" Daniel glanced briefly around the nearly empty garage before answering. "We received information about suspicious activity involving a vehicle matching yours. It should only take a minute." Ava remained composed. "Of course. What kind of suspicious activity?" Daniel shrugged lightly. "Routine investigation. Nothing personal." She quietly stepped away from the driver's door, keeping her hands visible and speaking with the calm professionalism that had defined her entire career. "If there's a legal reason to inspect the vehicle, I will cooperate." Daniel nodded with a thin smile that never reached his eyes. Several courthouse employees exiting the elevator slowed their pace as they noticed the interaction. A maintenance worker paused beside a cleaning cart. Two law students stopped several parking spaces away, exchanging uncertain glances while pretending to search for their own vehicle. The atmosphere changed almost instantly. Daniel circled the sedan slowly, shining a flashlight through the windows despite the remaining daylight. He spoke just loudly enough for nearby observers to hear. Sometimes people who spend their careers prosecuting others forget that nobody is above investigation. Ava met his words with quiet restraint. Nobody should be above accountability, officer. For the briefest moment, Daniel's expression hardened. Then it disappeared behind another practiced smile. He opened the driver's side door after announcing he would conduct a search. Ava watched silently, refusing to argue in front of the growing audience. She understood that emotion could easily become tomorrow's headline, while facts often required patience to be heard. Daniel leaned inside the vehicle, carefully blocking the view with his body. A few seconds passed, then several more. The witnesses could only see his shoulders moving as he searched areas hidden from their sight. Finally, he stepped backward, holding a small, clear plastic package between two gloved fingers. Gasps spread through the parking structure. Daniel lifted the evidence bag high enough for everyone nearby to see before looking directly at Ava. His voice carried across the concrete walls with unmistakable certainty. "Ms. Carter, would you care to explain why this was inside your vehicle?" A hush settled over the parking structure so quickly that it almost felt rehearsed. The maintenance worker lowered his eyes. One of the law students instinctively reached for a phone before stopping, uncertain whether recording would help or only make the moment worse. Ava Carter looked at the small package in Daniel Brooks's hand without taking a single step backward. Her expression did not change. She did not protest. She did not raise her voice. Instead, she asked one calm question. "Officer Brooks, are you certain that is the item you claim was recovered from my vehicle?" Daniel answered immediately, almost too quickly. "I am absolutely certain." His confidence spread through the gathering crowd. A courthouse employee quietly whispered that no prosecutor could survive an accusation like this. Another person shook his head in disappointment before any report had been written or any evidence examined. Assumptions moved faster than facts, just as they so often did. Daniel carefully placed the package into an evidence bag while speaking in the measured tone officers often used during official procedures. Every word sounded polished. Every movement appeared practiced. To anyone watching from a distance, it looked like a routine investigation carried out by an experienced veteran. Ava listened without interrupting. Years inside courtrooms had taught her that the loudest voice rarely carried the strongest case. She simply observed every detail, every sequence, every sentence, storing them quietly in her memory. Daniel requested that another patrol unit respond to the location. Within minutes, flashing emergency lights reflected against the concrete walls of the parking garage. More officers arrived, followed by courthouse supervisors trying to understand why one of the state's most respected prosecutors now stood beside her vehicle surrounded by law enforcement. Ugh. Conversations became quieter as more people recognized Ava. Some looked confused. Others looked uncomfortable. None seemed willing to question what they believed they had already witnessed. One young officer approached Daniel and quietly asked if additional documentation would be needed because of Ava's position. Daniel replied, loudly enough for nearby spectators to hear, "The law applies equally to everyone." The sentence sounded admirable, yet Ava could not ignore the irony. She had devoted her career to exactly that principle. She believed accountability protected honest officers as much as it protected innocent citizens. Standing there now, she realized how easily those same words could be used to disguise something entirely different. A courthouse administrator stepped forward and asked if Ava wished to contact legal counsel before answering additional questions. She nodded politely. "I appreciate the reminder, but first I would like every step of today's process documented exactly as it occurs." Daniel smiled faintly. "Everything is already being documented." Ava met his eyes for a brief moment. "I sincerely hope so." The response puzzled several people standing nearby, but Daniel dismissed it as quiet confidence from someone unwilling to accept reality. As the evening continued, local reporters began arriving outside the courthouse after hearing radio traffic about a high-profile investigation involving a prosecutor. Camera crews assembled across the street, while television producers rushed to prepare breaking news segments before the 6 o'clock broadcast. By sunset, Ava's name appeared across mobile phone notifications throughout the city. Social media filled with speculation, opinion, and certainty from people who possessed almost no verified information. Inside the patrol vehicle, transporting her downtown for processing, Ava remained silent as city lights passed across the window. She closed her eyes for only a moment, not because she had surrendered hope, but because she trusted something no headline, no rumor, and no carefully staged accusation could erase. Somewhere beyond public view, a tiny recording indicator had continued working exactly as it had been designed, capturing every second with quiet precision while no one involved believed it mattered. By the following morning, the story had spread far beyond Birmingham. Television anchors debated the allegations before sunrise. Newspaper websites placed Ava Carter's photograph beside headlines questioning how one of the state's most respected prosecutors could become the subject of a criminal investigation. Comment sections filled with certainty from people who had never stepped inside the parking garage and had never seen a single piece of verified evidence. Reputation, Ava understood, could take decades to build and only minutes to place on trial in the court of public opinion. Inside the district detention facility, she remained remarkably composed. She answered every procedural question respectfully, requested legal representation through the proper channels, and declined every opportunity to defend herself through emotion rather than facts. The officers completing paperwork noticed the contrast. Most people facing public humiliation argued endlessly. Ava simply observed, listened, and waited. Meanwhile, across town, Daniel Brooks walked into the police department with an unmistakable confidence. Several co-workers quietly congratulated him for what they believed was a major arrest involving a high-profile public official. Others nodded with approval, convinced the department had proven that nobody stood above the law. Daniel accepted the compliments with practiced humility, but inside he believed the greatest obstacle to his career had finally been removed. He completed reports with careful wording, reviewing each sentence before submitting it into the department record system. Every detail appeared orderly. Every timeline seemed consistent. To anyone reading the documents, the case looked complete. Yet hidden beneath the surface of those polished reports, one detail had already escaped his attention. Months earlier, the state prosecutor's office had quietly launched a pilot accountability program for attorneys handling sensitive investigations. Participating prosecutors received compact evidence recording devices designed to improve transparency. During interactions connected to official duties, the equipment was intentionally discreet, recording continuously while securely transmitting encrypted copies to protected government servers at regular intervals. Most employees barely discussed the program because it operated automatically in the background. Ava had almost forgotten she was wearing the small device clipped beneath the lapel of her jacket that afternoon. She certainly never expected it to become the most important witness in her own case. Deep inside a secure digital archive maintained by the prosecutor's technology division, encrypted files continued arriving exactly as scheduled. No alert sounded. No flashing warning lights appeared. The automated system simply performed the task it had been built to perform, storing each recording with precise timestamps accurate to the second. Hundreds of miles of fiber optic cable quietly carried the information from one secure server to another while the city argued over guilt and innocence without realizing the truth had already been preserved. Later that afternoon, Assistant Prosecutor Ethan Ross entered Ava's office to retrieve documents needed for the upcoming corruption trial. Her desk remained exactly as she had left it, every file organized with meticulous precision. While gathering case folders, his attention paused on a charging dock sitting beside her computer. One slot was empty. Ethan frowned, suddenly remembering the accountability devices issued several weeks earlier. He checked the equipment inventory list stored inside the office management system. Ava's recorder had never been checked back in. His expression changed instantly. Without wasting another second, he picked up the office telephone and called the technology division. On the other end of the line, a systems analyst opened the secure archive, entered Ava Carter's identification number, and watched dozens of encrypted recordings appear on screen. The latest upload had been completed at exactly 5:38 the previous evening, only minutes after the encounter inside the courthouse parking structure. The secure conference room inside the state prosecutor's office remained locked as Ethan Ross, Technology Director Linda Chavez, and Internal Affairs Investigator Sophia Bennett gathered around a large monitor. Nobody spoke while the encrypted recording finished loading. The timestamp matched the exact minute listed in Daniel Brooks's official report. Sophia folded her arms, reminding everyone that assumptions had already damaged enough lives. "We watch everything from beginning," she said quietly. "No skipping ahead." The recording opened with Ava Carter walking through the courthouse parking structure after leaving the Hall of Justice. Her voice was calm as she reviewed tomorrow's witness schedule into a digital case note. Every movement matched the timeline she had already provided through her attorney. Several minutes later, Daniel entered the frame. The conversation unfolded exactly as witnesses remembered. His tone sounded courteous. Ava answered every question respectfully. Sophia continued taking notes while the room remained silent. Then the camera captured something none of them expected to see so clearly. Because the recording device rested beneath Ava's lapel, its wide angle quietly reflected portions of Daniel's movements in the driver's side window. As he leaned into the vehicle, his body briefly shifted just enough for the reflection to reveal his right hand moving from his uniform pocket before disappearing below the dashboard. Nobody in the conference room said a word. Linda immediately froze the frame and enlarged the reflection using forensic enhancement software. The image became sharper with every adjustment. The outline of Daniel's hand appeared unmistakable. Sophia leaned closer to the monitor without taking her eyes from the screen. "Continue," she said. The recording resumed. Seconds later, Daniel stepped backward, holding the small plastic package that he claimed had been discovered during the search. Sophia quietly compared the timestamps with Daniel's written report. Something immediately stood out. According to his report, the evidence had supposedly been visible as soon as he entered the driver's side of the vehicle. The recording showed nearly 20 seconds during which his body completely blocked. The interior before the package suddenly appeared. Linda opened the digital audit log from the secure archive. Every upload had reached the government server automatically, each one verified with encryption signatures proving the files had never been edited after transmission. There were no missing seconds. No interrupted recordings. No unexplained gaps. Ethan slowly exhaled as the weight of the discovery settled over the room. The file authenticated itself before anyone even knew there would be an investigation. Sophia nodded, which means nobody could have created this afterward. At police headquarters, Daniel remained completely unaware that the review had begun. He attended briefing sessions, answered routine questions from supervisors, and confidently repeated the same version of events that now appeared throughout official records. His certainty reassured colleagues who had not yet seen the growing inconsistencies. Before leaving for the evening, he opened the department case management system one more time and reread his incident report. Satisfied that every sentence supported his narrative, he signed a final certification affirming the report was complete and accurate to the best of his knowledge. Across town, Sophia closed her notebook and looked once more at the frozen image on the monitor. "This does not end the investigation," she said carefully. "It begins a different one." No one in the room disagreed. Outside, the city continued debating Ava Carter's guilt, completely unaware that the first crack in the official story had already appeared, and with every verified frame preserved inside the secure archive, the truth was no longer waiting to be discovered. It was waiting to be revealed. The hearing began under a gray morning sky that matched the mood surrounding the Jefferson County Courthouse. Television vans lined the street before sunrise. Reporters rehearsed opening statements, and every seat inside the hearing room filled long before the judge entered. Some people arrived expecting to watch the final chapter of Ava Carter's career. Others came hoping to see whether the growing questions surrounding the investigation would finally receive real answers. Ava walked into the courtroom with the same quiet composure she had carried from the beginning. She acknowledged her attorney with a brief nod before taking her seat. Across the aisle, Daniel Brooks adjusted his uniform one final time. He still believed the official reports, witness statements, and physical evidence would outweigh any speculation circulating through the media. After all, he had spent years convincing juries that documentation deserved trust. He never imagined documentation would become the very thing that challenged him. Judge Margaret Ellis entered the courtroom, and the room immediately fell silent. After reviewing several preliminary motions, she turned toward Internal Affairs Investigator Sophia Bennett. Sophia stood, carrying a sealed evidence case to the presentation table. "Your Honor," she began, "during the course of our independent review, additional digital evidence was recovered, authenticated, and verified through the state prosecutor's secure archive. We request permission to present that evidence before these proceedings continue." The judge studied the accompanying certification documents before granting permission. Daniel exchanged a quick glance with his attorney, who remained outwardly calm but quietly leaned forward as the courtroom lights dimmed. The large courtroom monitor illuminated the room once again. Unlike the dramatic speculation that had dominated television broadcasts for days, the recording spoke with quiet precision. It showed Ava walking toward her vehicle. It captured the respectful conversation. It preserved each timestamp without interruption. Then came the moment that changed everything. Sophia paused the recording and enlarged the reflection visible in the driver's side window. Gasps spread softly through the gallery as the enhanced image clearly showed Daniel's hand moving from his uniform pocket while he stood partially inside the vehicle. No one interrupted. No one whispered. The silence became more powerful than any argument. Sophia resumed the recording frame by frame. The timing displayed on the screen no longer aligned with Daniel's written report. Every second contradicted a critical portion of the official narrative. Linda Chavez from the Technology Division testified that the encrypted files had uploaded automatically to secure government servers throughout the encounter, and that independent forensic verification confirmed the recordings had never been altered after transmission. The courtroom remained motionless. Daniel's attorney slowly lowered the copy of the incident report that had formed the center of the defense strategy only minutes earlier. Judge Ellis reviewed the authentication documents one final time before looking directly toward Daniel. Her voice remained calm, measured, and unmistakably clear. The integrity of this court depends upon truthful evidence. Based on the authenticated material presented today, significant questions now exist regarding the accuracy of the official report submitted in this matter. Accordingly, this court orders that the allegations against Ms. Carter be dismissed pending final administrative confirmation and directs that the evidence concerning Officer Brooks be referred immediately for further criminal and administrative investigation. Ava closed her eyes briefly, not in celebration, but in quiet relief. Around the courtroom, the story everyone thought they understood dissolved in a matter of minutes. The truth had never needed to speak loudly. It had only needed the opportunity to be heard. Outside the courthouse, the afternoon air felt different. The same reporters who had confidently announced Ava Carter's downfall only days earlier now stood beneath a forest of microphones waiting for official statements that no one seemed eager to give. Camera crews replayed the authenticated recording again and again, each frame replacing speculation with documented fact. Public opinion shifted almost overnight, but Ava understood that restored truth did not immediately erase damaged trust. She declined every request for an exclusive interview and quietly returned to her office, where stacks of unfinished case files still waited exactly as she had left them. Her focus had never been on winning headlines. It had always been on protecting the integrity of the law. Inside police headquarters, the atmosphere had changed just as dramatically. Officer Daniel Brooks no longer walked through the hallways surrounded by quiet admiration. Conversations stopped when he entered a room, not because of respect, but because uncertainty had replaced confidence. Administrative investigators carefully collected department records, radio communications, body camera logs, evidence documentation, and previous case files connected to Daniel's assignments. Every document was reviewed with fresh attention. Every report received a second look. Internal Affairs investigator Sophia Bennett insisted that each inquiry remain impartial. The evidence will decide every conclusion, she reminded her team. Nothing more and nothing less. As investigators compared timelines from older cases, several inconsistencies began to emerge. Individually, they appeared minor. Together, they formed patterns that could no longer be ignored. Supervisors ordered additional reviews wherever documentation raised legitimate questions, ensuring that every affected case would receive the careful examination it deserved. Former defendants, attorneys, and witnesses were contacted through proper legal procedures as records were reevaluated. The department publicly acknowledged the ongoing investigation and emphasized that accountability strengthened public confidence rather than weakened it. Across the city, community leaders organized a public forum focused on transparency, professional ethics, and rebuilding trust between law enforcement and the neighborhoods they served. Ava accepted an invitation but asked not to be introduced as a victim or a hero. When she addressed the audience, her voice remained calm. Justice is strongest when it protects every person equally, including those who have the authority to enforce it. The room answered with quiet applause rather than celebration. Many officers attending the meeting nodded in agreement because they understood that misconduct by one individual placed unfair burdens upon countless others who served honorably every day. Captain Michael Reynolds later announced several policy improvements, including expanded evidence review procedures, additional accountability, training, and broader use of secure digital recording technology. He acknowledged that public confidence could only be earned through consistent action, not carefully written statements. Meanwhile, Daniel remained on administrative leave while the independent investigation continued. The certainty that had once defined his every decision had vanished, replaced by long hours of interviews, document reviews, and unanswered questions. For the first time in many years, he found himself on the opposite side of the system he had always believed he fully understood. Ava returned to preparing the corruption case that had been interrupted weeks earlier. She organized witness files, reviewed legal arguments, and stepped back into the courtroom with the same quiet professionalism she had always carried. Nothing about her routine changed because her purpose had never changed. The law had tested her reputation, but the truth had protected her character. And as the city slowly moved forward, one lesson echoed through every courtroom, every precinct, and every office where public trust mattered most. Authority could command attention for a moment, but only integrity could withstand the passage of time. Several months later, autumn sunlight settled across the steps of the Jefferson County Courthouse as people moved through its familiar entrance with coffee cups, legal briefs, and ordinary concerns that now seemed strangely peaceful. The headlines had faded. Television crews had found new stories. The public debate had moved on. Yet inside the building, the lessons from those remarkable weeks continued shaping everyday decisions in quiet but meaningful ways. New accountability procedures had become standard practice. Training sessions emphasized integrity as strongly as authority. Young prosecutors and newly sworn officers often heard the same reminder during orientation. Public trust was not inherited with a title. It was earned through thousands of honest choices that nobody else would ever see. Ava Carter returned to her courtroom exactly where she belonged. She prosecuted cases with the same calm professionalism that had defined her career long before the investigation. Changed her life. She never mentioned her own experience while arguing before judges or speaking with juries. She believed justice worked best when the evidence remained at the center of every decision rather than the people presenting it. Her colleagues noticed that if anything had changed, it was only her patience. She listened more carefully, encouraged younger attorneys more often, and reminded them that character revealed itself most clearly during difficult moments rather than easy victories. One afternoon, after concluding another successful hearing, Ava walked through the courthouse lobby carrying the same leather portfolio she had held on the day everything began. A young law student approached her with visible hesitation and asked a simple question. After everything that happened, how did you keep believing in the system? Ava paused before answering. She looked toward the courtroom doors where judges, attorneys, clerks, and officers continued serving the public one case at a time. Then she smiled gently and replied, because the system is never stronger than the people willing to protect its principles. When honest people refuse to give up, the truth always has another chance to be heard. The student thanked her quietly before walking away with a renewed sense of purpose. At nearly the same hour, Internal Affairs investigator Sophia Bennett completed the final administrative review connected to the investigation. She closed the last file, signed the final page, and placed it into the permanent archive. For her, the outcome had never been about celebrating someone's downfall. It had always been about preserving confidence in institutions that depended upon honesty. Captain Michael Reynolds later addressed a graduating class of police recruits. Standing beneath the department flag, he reminded them that a badge represented responsibility rather than privilege. Every citizen you meet deserves fairness, he said. The community will remember how you treat people long after they forget your name. The room remained silent as each recruit reflected upon those words. As evening settled over Birmingham, Ava left the courthouse and walked toward the parking area where months earlier her life had nearly changed forever. The concrete looked ordinary again. The echoes had disappeared. The fear had been replaced by quiet determination. She paused for only a moment before continuing forward, knowing the past could never be rewritten, but the future could always be shaped by better choices. Above the courthouse entrance, the carved words promising equal justice remained unchanged, just as they had for generations. This time, however, they seemed to carry deeper meaning. Power may influence a moment. Lies may delay the truth. But integrity has a remarkable way of outlasting both. And in the end, justice did not wear a uniform or a suit. It lived in the courage to choose what was right, even when nobody believed the truth was still listening.